This free step-by-step video comes to you directly from Haynes, creators of the world's best repair manuals. Fix your car or truck the right way with our accurate and reliable information at your side. You can complete more than 200 jobs on this vehicle when you purchase the complete online manual at Haynes.com.
Pull the hood release lever, located on the driver's side kick panel. Lift the hood safety latch and raise the hood upwards, then support it with the prop rod. Loosen the cable nut, then disconnect the negative battery cable. Drain the cooling system. Turn the heater control to the maximum heat setting. With the engine cool, wrap a thick cloth around the radiator cap, then slowly unscrew it and remove it from the radiator. Move a large container under the radiator drain fitting to catch the coolant. Open the drain fitting until coolant starts flowing from the drain hole. A pair of pliers may be required to turn it. Allow the coolant in the radiator to drain completely. While the coolant is draining, check the condition of the radiator hoses, heater hoses, and clamps. Replace any damaged clamps or hoses before refilling the cooling system. Once the coolant has finished draining, tighten the radiator drain plug securely by hand. Dispose of the used coolant properly. Apply the handbrake. Shock the rear wheels to prevent the vehicle from rolling. Loosen the front wheel lug nuts. Then jack up the front of the car and support it on jack stands. Remove the appropriate front wheel. On 1.7-liter engines, there are two drive belts, both of the belts relying on manual adjustment tensioners. To remove the power steering pump drive belt, lift the power steering fluid reservoir straight out of its bracket and position it temporarily aside. Loosen the power steering pump mounting bolt then loosen the lock nut. Turn the adjuster wing nut by hand, then push the power steering pump downwards to loosen the belt tension. Slip the belt off the pulley and remove it from the engine compartment. To remove the alternator and air conditioning compressor drive belt, loosen the alternator upper mounting bolt. Loosen the adjuster bracket mounting bolt. And also the lock bolt. Turn the adjuster wing nut by hand Then pivot the alternator to loosen the belt tension. Slip the belt off the pulley and remove it from the engine compartment. Remove the power steering pump mounting bolts. Then position the power steering pump and reservoir aside without disconnecting any power steering hoses. Release the power steering hoses from the retaining clips. Pull back the protective cover. Then remove the nut for the battery positive cable on the alternator. Depress the tab and release the alternator wiring harness from the bracket. Depress the tab and disconnect the electrical connector from the alternator. Remove the alternator lower mounting bolt and drive belt adjuster bracket bolts and remove the bracket. Completely unscrew the alternator upper mounting bolt, then slide the bolt out as far as possible. It may provide easier access for removing the alternator if the power steering fluid reservoir bracket is removed. Rotate the fasteners 90 degrees and remove the harness cover from the ignition coils. Disconnect the coil electrical connectors. Then remove the coil mounting nuts. Mark the coils to their installed positions. Then pull the coils straight out and remove them. Remove the ignition coil wiring harness assembly mounting bolts. Detach any retaining tabs for the wiring harness assembly. Then disconnect the electrical connector at the end of the harness. Lift the harness assembly up off the valve cover, then position it aside. Remove the engine oil dipstick. Loosen the valve cover mounting bolts a little at a time, working in a crisscross pattern along the valve cover. Remove the valve cover mounting bolts. Slide back the clamp and remove the breather hose from the valve cover. Lift off the rearmost wiring harness from the valve cover. It may be easiest to unfasten the zip tie retaining one of the harness wires before lifting it off. Unscrew and remove the two air conditioning line bracket bolts located at the left front and left rear of the valve cover. Wipe off the valve cover to prevent debris from falling onto the exposed camshaft and valve train assembly. With the mounting bolts pulled out as far as possible, carefully lift off the valve cover and gasket. If the gasket is stuck to the cylinder head, tap it with a rubber mallet to break the seal. Do not pry between the cover and the cylinder head, or you will damage the gasket mating surfaces. With the engine properly supported, loosen the bolts and remove the upper left engine mount bracket. Pry off the rubber cover and disconnect the camshaft position sensor. Remove the cover retaining bolts, then pull off the upper timing belt cover. Remove the spark plugs from the engine. Using a socket, extension, and ratchet on the crankshaft pulley bolt, rotate the crankshaft pulley counterclockwise until both the white TDC mark on the pulley aligns with the pointer on the lower timing belt cover, and the up indicator on the camshaft sprocket is facing up. There are also two notches on the rear of the sprocket that should remain horizontal with the cylinder head surface of the procedure. Unscrew the crankshaft pulley bolt. A special tool that engages with the recessed hex in the pulley opening is available to prevent the crankshaft from turning while unscrewing the bolt. Use a long breaker bar, extension, and socket to break the crankshaft bolt loose. Using a floor jack handle placed over the breaker bar will provide extra leverage, and a jack stand can be used as added support. Perform this step carefully to prevent injury. If the timing marks on the crankshaft and camshaft were misaligned when breaking the bolt loose, be sure to realign them before proceeding. Remove the pulley bolt and slip the pulley off the crankshaft. Be careful not to lose the small woodruff key as the pulley is removed. Remove the mounting bolts, then remove the lower timing belt cover from the fender well. Unbolt and position the crankshaft position sensor aside. Unbolt and remove the side engine mount bracket. Note the locations of the different length bolts being removed. If you intend to reuse the timing belt, use the white paint or chalk to match marks that align the sprockets with the belt and an arrow to indicate the direction of rotation. Loosen the timing belt tensioner bolt. Most tensioners will have an Allen key slot that will allow you to rotate it against spring pressure and slip the timing belt off the tensioner. Remove the timing belt from the engine. Remove the water pump mounting bolts, taking note of the different length bolts locations. Remove the water pump from the engine. Tap it lightly with a hammer to break the pump seal, and be prepared for coolant loss as the seal is broken. Position a drain pan underneath the pump if necessary. Clean the bolt threads and the threaded holes in the engine to remove corrosion and sealant. Remove all traces of old gasket sealant and O-ring deposits from the engine using a gasket scraper and rags saturated in the brake system cleaner. Apply a thin layer of RTV sealant to the O-ring groove of the new pump. Then carefully set a new O-ring in the groove. Carefully attach the pump to the engine and thread the bolts into the holes, finger tight. Use a small amount of RTV sealant on the bolt threads. Tighten the bolts a little at a time to the specified torque setting. Don't over-tighten the bolts or the pump may be distorted. Rotate the timing belt tensioner pulley by hand and move it from side to side, checking for play and rough rotation. Replace it if roughness or play is detected, or if there is any doubt about its condition. The new tensioner should have a release pin inserted through it. Install the tensioner onto the engine, tightening the mounting bolt finger tight. Remove the crankshaft sprocket and clean the area around the crankshaft oil seal. Inspect the condition of the oil seal. Replace it if necessary. Install the inner belt guide and crankshaft sprocket into the correct direction. Make sure that the timing mark on the crankshaft sprocket and the pointer on the oil pump are aligned. Before installing the timing belt, double-check that the up mark on the camshaft sprocket is at the top and the two index marks are in line with the cylinder head surface. Carefully install the timing belt around the crankshaft sprocket, then around the tensioner pulley, water pump pulley, and camshaft sprocket in the correct order. With the tensioner mounting bolt slightly loose, connect the spring from the tensioner to the engine, applying a slight tension to the belt. Install the woodruff key, crankshaft pulley, then loosely install the mounting bolt onto the crankshaft. Slowly turn the crankshaft counterclockwise 2 revolutions. Then recheck the timing and index marks on the camshaft sprocket and crankshaft sprocket for proper alignment. Tighten the tensioner mounting bolt to the specified torque setting. Remove the release pin from the tensioner, which will apply full tension to the belt. Remove the crankshaft pulley and woodruff key. Install the crankshaft position sensor and tighten the mounting bolt securely. Install the side engine mount bracket with the bolts installed in their correct locations. Tighten these bolts securely. Install the lower timing belt cover and tighten the mounting bolts securely, but avoid over-tightening and cracking the plastic. Install the woodruff key and crankshaft pulley, then screw in the mounting bolt. Tighten the crankshaft pulley bolt to the specified torque setting with the tool used in loosening the pulley bolt to also counterhold the crankshaft when tightening. It's a good idea to rotate the crankshaft pulley once again and double check that the alignment marks still meet up in their exact locations. Attach the wiring harness clip to the lower timing belt cover. Install the upper timing belt cover and mounting bolts. Tighten the bolts securely, but avoid cracking the plastic. Connect the camshaft position sensor electrical connector, then secure the rubber cover. Install the engine mount bracket and screw on the mounting nuts. Tighten the nuts securely. Remove the jack from the engine oil pan. Remove the old gasket from the valve cover and clean the matting surfaces of the cylinder head and the valve cover. Clean the surfaces thoroughly with a rag soaked in brake system cleaner. When cleaning the cylinder head matting surface, remove any old remaining gasket deposits and be careful to prevent foreign matter from falling into the valve train. Carefully remove the spark plug seals with a screwdriver and clean the area with a rag saturated in brake system cleaner. Install new spark plug seals into the recesses. A correctly sized socket and hammer can be used to evenly install the seals. It is also a good idea to replace the valve cover bolt seals to prevent any further oil leaks. Install a new molded rubber gasket into the groove around the valve cover perimeter. Apply beads of RTV sealant to the gasket in the indicated areas. With the matting surfaces clean, position aside any wiring harnesses or components that would obstruct valve cover installation. Carefully place the valve cover in position, taking care not to accidentally bump or smear the RTV sealant that has been pre-applied to the cover. Install the cover mounting bolts and tighten them lightly, a little at a time, in a crisscross pattern. Tighten the valve cover mounting bolts to the specified torque setting using the correct torque sequence. Install the breather hose to the valve cover and secure it with the clamp. Install and tighten the engine oil filler cap by hand. Bring the ignition coil wiring harness back onto the valve cover. Install the rearmost wiring harness onto the valve cover studs, followed by the coil wiring harness, then the throttle and cruise control cable brackets. Secure the wiring behind the valve cover to the metal bracket with a zip tie. Install the spark plugs to the engine. Install the ignition coil securely onto the spark plugs and connect the coil electrical connectors. Install the coil mounting bolts and the rear valve cover bracket bolts. Tighten these bolts securely. Install the coil wiring harness bracket bolts. Tighten them securely. Install any additional bracket bolts or clips that were removed previously, such as the air conditioning line brackets and wiring harness bracket under the AC line. Insert the dipstick. Install the plastic coil cover and secure the cover fasteners. Install the alternator to the mounting bracket and slide in the upper mounting bolt, screwing it into place. Install the power steering fluid reservoir bracket and tighten the fastener securely. Connect the alternator electrical connections. Tighten the nut securely for the battery positive alternator cable. Then push the protective cover onto the terminal. Secure the alternator wiring harness into the bracket. Install the drive belt adjuster bracket and mounting bolts, but don't tighten these bolts completely until the alternator drive belt has been adjusted. Install the alternator drive belt first, placing it loosely across the alternator, air conditioning compressor, and crankshaft pulleys. Make sure the belt is centered in the pulley grooves. Set the belt tension by tightening the adjuster wing nut by hand. The tension of each belt is checked by pushing on it at a distance halfway between the pulleys. Apply about 20 pounds of force with your thumb and see how much the new belt moves down or deflects. Measure the deflection with a ruler. It should deflect at the specified measurement. Once the belt is at the correct tension, tighten the adjuster mounting bracket bolt, adjuster lock bolt, and alternator upper mounting bolt securely. Reposition the power steering pump back into place and secure the hoses into the clips. Install the power steering pump adjuster and mounting fasteners. Delay full tightening of the power steering pump fasteners until the drive belt has been adjusted. Loosely install the power steering pump drive belt, making sure the belt is centered in the pulley grooves. Set the power steering pump belt tension by tightening the adjuster wing nut by hand, in the same way the alternator belt was tensioned. Measure the belt deflection with a ruler. It should deflect at the specified measurement. Once the belt is at the correct tension, tighten the power steering pump mounting bolt and lock nut securely. Slide the power steering fluid reservoir fully onto the mounting bracket. Install the front wheels and lug nuts. Lower the car to the ground and tighten the wheel lug nuts to the specified torque setting. Connect the negative battery cable and tighten the bolts securely. Fill the cooling system with the proper type and mixture of antifreeze up to the base of the radiator filler neck. Loosely install the radiator cap. Start the engine and run at approximately 1500 RPM until the radiator fan comes on 2 times. Feel the upper radiator hose. It should be warm, indicating the thermostat has opened. Turn off the engine and let it cool down. Slowly remove the radiator cap and recheck the coolant level, adding more as necessary to bring the level up to the base of the filler neck. Fully install the radiator cap. Fill the coolant reservoir with coolant until the level reaches slightly above the minimum mark. Run the engine, check for leaks and proper operation of the engine.